Thanks a lot, Steve, and welcome everyone here today. What we'd like to do in this panel session is for me not to speak a whole lot, but for us to field some questions with our technical assessors who have been kind enough to join us on stage today, and sort of get their perspective on that important volunteer role and how that serves NATA. The title we gave this session today was how this peer review process of NATA's benefits everyone. Now, I was contemplating putting a little asterisk on everyone, because maybe that is a little bit broad. But then when I thought about it, it is a process which benefits everyone in terms of Australia and our health, safety and well-being. So I've left it as an everyone, but in this instance, our focus will largely be on how that process benefits NATA, benefits NATA's accredited facilities, what experiences it provides for those people who volunteer as technical assessors, and what sort of flow-on benefits there might be for employers of individuals who volunteer as technical assessors. So one of the things that I do in my role is I actually evaluate accreditation bodies in other economies, mainly in the Asia-Pacific region. So it turns out that most economies around the world have an accreditation body. We're not unique in that sense. As Devon sort of mentioned yesterday afternoon, there is a consistency amongst the way accreditation bodies go about providing accreditation. And some economies will have one accreditation body. Sometimes these ABs, there will be more than one. There'll be big generalists like NATA. There'll be very small specific ones. There'll be some ABs are parts of government, some are for-profit, some are not-for-profit. They're all different in a range of ways. The last time I looked at the International Laboratory Accreditation Cooperation website, there were over 110 accreditation bodies that are signatories to that arrangement. And being a signatory to that arrangement means that AB, or accreditation body, complies with a particular international standard. But in my role, as I mentioned, as an evaluator, when I go out and look at these different ABs around the region, they all meet that standard, but they all do it differently. Every AB is, in at least one sense or another, unique in the way they go about their business. But we establish that the end result is the same. So looking at my experience in that environment, the thing that really makes NATA unique, in my opinion, is our peer review process. So NATA uses volunteers as technical assessors. That is extremely rare in the international world of accreditation bodies. That gives us flexibility, but it also means that you're looking at individuals who are prepared to provide their time and their effort and their expertise on that basis. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of context around NATA. We are, in the scheme of things, a large accreditation body. We have, as you can see, over 4,000 accredited sites and well over 2,000 technical assessors who volunteer to help us assess those sites for competence. And if we look at what NATA does in the course of a year, sorry, I used the right button. We're a pretty busy bunch of people. In the last 12 months, we did well over 3,000 individual assessments. Now, not all of those require a technical assessor, but many of them do. And we utilised the services of over 1,000 individual volunteer technical assessors. So that's a huge resource. And the work that people like Paul, Sam and Bob do in that NATA process is just huge to the way NATA works. But it's not just about making NATA work and providing accreditation. The peer review process really offers enables NATA to really target its expertise that it brings to an assessment to the particular scope that's being assessed at that site at that time. So we don't take absolute generalists out to look at a facility because it's a 17025 facility. We go down to scope row by scope row, and we find individual TAs who have, as a single or more than one TA at that assessment, cover absolutely everything on that scope. And that's down to methodology, it's down to technique, it's down to matrices, all sorts of things. So when we do an assessment of technical competence, we are absolutely ensuring that we have experts like these guys who know what that facility is doing, they know the equipment they're using, they know the methodology, they can make really sound decisions around the competence of that facility. But perhaps more than that, it's the interaction between the accredited facility and the technical assessors, which is where we start to derive some, I guess, interesting and different benefits. We've all, I guess, would agree after what we've heard over the last day and a half that, you know, accreditation is really important in how it supports trade, it underpins our health, safety and well-being, and, you know, it's a real hidden safety net into how modern economies get by and provide the sort of lifestyle that we're lucky enough to live. So what I'd like to do is to move into some questions now and let these guys, these volunteer TAs, explore, you know, some of their experiences, some of their motivations, some of the things that they may have got personally, professionally, or that their organisations may get from their volunteer work as NATA Technical Assessors. So in putting this panel together, you might think I just ran around outside and these three guys were already here, so I just asked them down, but I did actually call them prior to the event, and there was a little bit of reasoning behind that, and I won't go into specific numbers, but Bob has done many assessments for us over a long period of time, as well as other volunteer roles within NATA. Sam has a shorter tenure as a TA, but still significant. And Paul's one of our newer people on deck. So what I was trying to do was get a bit of a perspective in terms of tenure in that role and how that might impact these individuals' views on the work they do. But, you know, deferring to tenure of service, I might direct my first question to Bob Simons. And Bob, congratulations on the award last night. I think that was great for Eurofins. Look, as a longer-term volunteer with NATA, and you know, not only is it TA, but I guess we're focusing on the TA role today, what would you say has driven your significant and ongoing contribution in this volunteer role to NATA?
Thanks, Tony, and it's been a delight to be part of this conference over the last 2 days. And yes, I am the elder, well, I won't call myself a statesman, but the elder person in this panel. Managed to, as I said, we've been accredited to 17025, and I remember back the previous version, so we're currently in the 2017 edition, but I remember back in the 2005 edition. So there's been some changes over that period of time, and it's always good to be either with NATA as a technical assessor, or I've also been an assessor with IANZ as well in New Zealand when I lived over there for a period. But I think, and working in laboratories, you know, we're always trying to be better, and I think the experience of the role as a technical assessor, but also other roles within NATA has helped me bring back some of those qualities to our own lab and try and improve as best we can.
Great, thanks, Bob. Sam, you're sort of in an interesting position. You actually work for NATA now, but had a considerable period of time working as a technical assessor before that. So I think you've been with us a little bit over 18 months now, changed our world, so that's great. That change of perspective, I guess, going from the world of working in an accredited facility, being a volunteer technical assessor, going out to other accredited facilities, to now jumping the fence and working for NATA. Has that sort of changed your understanding or perspective of the importance of technical assessors to the work that NATA does?
Definitely, most definitely. I've been really lucky to be an analyst, an authorised rep, a technical assessor, and jumping the fence and seeing the much bigger picture that technical assessors provide to the accreditation process. As a technical assessor, I thought I was pretty important and pretty groovy doing what I did. But now seeing the bigger picture and the amount of work and effort that goes into behind the scenes to make these assessments happen, to contact technical assessors and the volunteer nature that they have, they can't always commit to be able to do the assessments as much as they would like to. So it's quite a long process to contact the right people, getting them to travel sometimes for sometimes more than one day. So seeing all that, I've got a lot of respect, much more than I had before, of the machinations behind the scenes to get all this together and to run smoothly as much as it does do.
Okay, thanks Sam. Now, I never was a technical assessor. I did used to work in laboratories many years ago, and I don't begrudge NATA that at the time. But Paul, you're relatively new to the role of technical assessor. And I say relatively because you have done several assessments already. What do you think you've learnt about the assessment process now? You've seen it sort of from both sides, from being in an accredited facility to now going out in an assessment team to someone else's accredited facility to look at their technical competence.
It's huge changes from when I first started out as an analyst. All you see is just whatever you get taught. As you evolved in your career and going into Sims and Sams and Bobs, moving to lab management, to quality management, and as a technical assessor, you see how much involvement is required to add into a package, and similarly as a technical assessor, how much time is required pre and post assessments, and that overall, I mean, this is still only a small glimpse of what the overall process is and Sam's experience in the bigger, wider perspective.
That's excellent. Thanks, Paul. And yeah, I think it really is a different perspective when you're judging the technical competence and the processes and whether they comply with a standard in a facility. And I could preface the next very general question with a really short anecdote that when I first started being a lead assessor with NATA, I remember taking a technical assessor to a really cutting-edge technical laboratory, and I thought all of his interest would be in this latest equipment and the approach they're taking with that, which he was very interested in. But as we walked out at the end of the day into the car park, he said to me that the way they organise their sample fridge would save his guys a huge amount of time each week. It was just such a simple thing that this individual had got from an assessment, and it wasn't high tech, but it was a really useful nugget to take back to his facility, which must have had, to be honest, pretty messy sample fridges. But look, the general question to the group, have you got any examples of what you've learnt from your work as a technical assessor, whether it be around testing per se or whether it be more broadly around how you go about other aspects of work when you get back to your own facility?
Well, I think if I can start, Tony, I think your anecdote was a good one, because of all the technical assessments, it's those little things that make the difference. And sometimes, it's the simple things that you assume, but when it's shown in front of you, you can bring them back to your own lab. So I think that's one of the highlights of doing assessments, is you see people doing the same analysis but in different ways. So it's always good to see new ways of doing things.
Yep, I can add to that as well. I always found that no matter what facility I went out to, I would always learn something new. I would always look at it from a different perspective, and there were always tidbits that I would go back and go, oh, I could really do this a little bit better. I can train my people. I can give them another way to access them. I can approach things in a different format that will actually establish their growth and development. So there's always value to be had from every single facility that you go out to.
Yeah, I'm the same. It's all about the collaboration between facilities and yourselves, and be very open-minded to different techniques and ability to work differently as well. You know, we're not stuck in one way.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. And sort of flipping that around a little bit, and I know the role of NATA and of the assessment team is purely to establish that that facility complies with the accreditation requirements that are relevant to that facility. But in terms of being technical peers of a facility, what do you think an accredited facility and the individuals working there might gain from the opportunity during an assessment to interact with their technical peers in terms of being a technical assessor? Do you guys see any benefits, and we're not talking about consulting or whatever, but any benefits just in being able to, that pure interaction between technical peers, talking about how that facility goes about its accredited work?
Yeah, you go for it.
Go for it.
I'll jump in. It's the knowledge sharing. It's the different perspectives. That's what's the biggest thing for me. Looking at, they're not your facility. They do things slightly differently, and getting on board with that. I think the conversations that you have is the most important thing that have happened with me. So you do the assessment, they look at compliance, you look at what they do, but it's those conversations that sometimes continue on into lunches and things like that, that really expand your own knowledge and understanding. So then you become a better technical assessor for the next assessment. So you're constantly growing, and your expertise is coming much more depth of knowledge.
I think it's the collegial spirit as well, to build relationships. Like I've met some people today where I've done assessments at their facility, and then you meet them at a conference like this and you're able to sort of relate to other things as well. So it's building, especially in the environmental area, it's a highly competitive area, and you know, we like to keep our trade secrets to ourselves, but in a NATA assessment you have to be as open as possible, and so I think it builds that collegial spirit.
Yeah, that's interesting, Bob, because it was a long time since I worked in a laboratory, but I do remember interacting with technical assessors who might say something like, I really like what you're working on in that validation. It's not necessarily what's being assessed today, but I think you're on the right track there, and that's just a really useful piece of information, or just the pure networking, to have someone that you can potentially ring up outside of the accreditation context and say, look, you know, we're thinking of leasing this sort of equipment. What's your guys' experience been? Anything you wanted to add on that front, Paul?
But even just assessing facilities, having met you know, quite a number of technicians through their career as well, and seeing where they progress in their career in general, and then be able to meet them in different facilities at different capacities, and understanding how they evolved as a professional in their technical components as well.
It is an interesting one, because I know certainly a lot of the fields in which we provide accreditation, there is a lot of competition between companies, organisations, but the fact that the peer review process sort of not rises above that, but you know, can operate regardless of that, I think is impressive. And I think, you know, if we talk about environmental or you know, construction materials, whatever it might be, there is a sort of collegiate background to those industries, regardless of, or not regardless of, you know, cognizant of the competition that does exist. One of the things that I'm not sure everyone knows is that NATA sends out assessment teams when we're looking at technical competence. So that would be typically a NATA employee, who we call a lead assessor or accreditation specialist, who run the assessment. They understand the requirements. They might look at particular aspects of that. but they rely on technical assessors to look at the testing, the competence, the equipment, the techniques, the methodologies and so on. And it is an interesting team dynamic, and I'm just interested amongst you guys, what do you guys as technical assessors rely on that NATA lead assessor for during the course of an assessment?
I can go first. So, from my very first assessment to the most recent ones, the lead assessor's been amazing. Like everyone I've interacted, it's been able to challenge my perspective on how the standards are interpreted as well providing all the relevant documents for me to review and be able to have an open discussion without being biased in any way. That's been really amazing for me.
Yeah. And that's an interesting point, Paul, because I'm not sure everyone necessarily appreciates that the standards and requirements that we accredit to require interpretation. They require adaptation to what's going on in that facility on that day. It's not a tick box job. It's an intellectual activity to get in there and understand whether or not this is a way to meet that standard and those requirements. So yeah, I think that's a really good point. Just to continue with you, Paul, as someone relatively new to the technical assessor role, has it been what you expected? Better, worse, different?
It's been what I expected. So similar to Bob and Sam, we've gone through the old system where it initially accredited for our own expertise. Having been recognised as a TA, it's internally and professionally, it's amazing because I know my technical skill set is there. In terms of the role itself, it is more or less what I expected, and it keeps me challenging myself.
So it must be a nice feeling after you've done your first assessment to sort of sit back and think, oh, I actually do know what I'm doing. It must be very reassuring. Just moving on, Sam, I know in discussions with you over your time at NATA, you've mentioned that one aspect of being a technical assessor is identifying individuals at assessment or assessments who you think might make a good technical assessor. And I got the impression you were actually quite proud of the fact that you'd been able to bring people, like I think Paul might be an example, on board. What sort of attributes do you think would have drawn your attention to someone to say, well, actually, maybe I should recommend this person to NATA as a potential technical assessor?
Yep, over my 10-year tenure as a technical assessor, I always go back to my very first assessment when I was really new, and I was super nervous. I was shaking, just trying to do anything. And my technical assessor, he was lovely. He was kind. He got me calm. He was approachable. I didn't feel like I was under examination. I didn't feel like it's a pass or fail. He just was able to give me questions in different ways that I understood. So he drew me out. So we actually began having a discussion, and I felt like I was talking to a friend. And before I knew it, I was performing all the tests. I was carrying on, I was doing everything, and I was like, oh, he's like, thank you very much, the assessment's done. It was like an hour and a half later, and it flew back. So I look for someone that is approachable, someone that has really good soft skills, and identifying those who are nervous, making them feel at ease, able to pull those things out of people, able to be patient, be understanding. But of course, they need to have technical competence. They need to be, at the top of their field. So to give that relationship, to give you more back. I mean, a few of them even gave me extra guidance after the fact, and we became friends and a support network. So when I look for people on assessments, I really watch their body language. I watch how they do, how they interact. I see how they are with their other people while waiting for me to come in to do the assessment. So I really take a keen note of who they are as a person after I've seen the technical competence. And yeah, that's how I identified Paul a few years back. And I thought, oh, he's fantastic, in his field, but he has all the elements that would make a really good technical assessor. So I'm really glad that he took it up, because not everybody does because of life commitments. They're not able to do it. So I think having assessors like Paul and even Bob, even though I didn't recommend you, you're well above me. But I would have if I could have, I promise.
He got on the list just before.
But I think it improves what we're trying to achieve, to bring an industry up to a consistent high standard, and that's what we need going forward.
You know, I think that's something that we all expect from NATA assessments, is to bring us up a little bit. I often say you need a new set of eyes. You know, I look at our own internal documents and read them and read them and read them and make changes and so forth, and then get a technical assessor to come through and they'll look at it and they go, oh, you've made a spelling mistake, or this sentence doesn't make sense. So you need that second set of eyes sometimes, and that's one of the benefits of an NATA assessment.
Just one specifically for you, Bob, and I assume the answer to the first part is yes, but would you recommend the technical assessor role to those currently working in laboratories? And possibly more importantly, why would you do that, assuming the yes to the first?
Well, it is yes. And it goes back to what I said earlier. You always learn something. You know, on a technical assessment, you always learn, you know, the ways that different laboratories do the same tests. They may do it better, or they may not do it as quite as good as what you're used to, but it's just little tips you pick up. I've never been on an assessment where I haven't learned something. So I think it's well worth it. Yes, it does take some time, and you're away from, you know, from the lab bench and so forth, but it nevertheless pays back in spades. So, you know, I think it's well worth. If anybody out there wants to be a technical assessor, please, put your hand up, because I think it's you really do benefit from that process.
And I want to jump in on that one. I work for NATA now, but if there was a way I could still be a technical assessor, I would. I enjoyed the entire time that I did it. And on my last sort of year before I joined NATA, I did as many as I possibly could, just to sort of give the final dash. So yeah, I think it's well worth it. There are no negatives in becoming a technical assessor. It improves your soft skills, it improves your technical competence. It opens your eyes to other fields, so it's not always your section. You could be lots of other technical assessors for other areas there that you get to learn and see, and you get to sort of have a look at other parts of facilities. So it's just a monumental improvement for your own personal and professional development.
Yeah, it was similar to, in a similar light too, I've done a couple of assessments where you're collaborating with other TAs, where you share knowledge of, you know, similar techniques and how to interpret, or how do you explain to an assessee on the concept around it. It gives you a different perspective and different language that you can use.
So the areas that you three work in are important to the health, well-being and safety of Australians, if we're talking about environmental and workplace health and safety. And I'd probably start from the workplace health and safety, or occupational safety perspective. But, you know, how do you guys see the peer review process benefiting the health, well-being and safety of all Australians through, you know, specifically the work that's done by facilities that are counting asbestos, for example, or identifying asbestos, and the concept that the peer review process, you know, brings up the work and the reliability that's done by those facilities? Do you feel like you're an important part of the world?
Definitely. So, you know, asbestos is where my technical specialties lies. Having understanding very thoroughly with the standards and guidance notes that we adhere to, make sure that the facility that we assess upholds that high standard, understanding and reporting correctly, and making sure what we produce, it is of higher standards that doesn't have an adverse effects to the public. That's critical to what we do.
I think for those of you who are not, or haven't been in Sydney, or don't live in Sydney, we had Mulchgate over the beginning of this year and over Christmas. So we've had to adapt our methods for measuring asbestos in mulch. So typically, you know, we're measuring asbestos in building materials or in soil or in air. But to be presented with, you know, a few kilograms of mulch and try and establish those methods, so I think that's been quite a challenge. And I think the other part of that question, Tony, if I may, is that the media sensationalise asbestos. So we need to, bring that back, I think, to, what it is in reality, and try and, put a balanced viewpoint there.
So we've actually got some questions from the audience, so thank you to those who have done that. And I think there's a link between what we're talking about here, which is sort of specific around asbestos for a minute, but in the background there's a lot of work going on in the standards space around the sorts of testing protocols that support asbestos identification, in particular, I think, in bulk materials. And there's a question here around standards and NATA's interaction with that. So I'll just read that out and see if we have any takers. Sorry, I didn't bring reading glasses. NATA is a key link between standards and the coalface. Is there a role for reviewing, advising, and advocating for change in standards where issues are identified? Would anyone like to put forward an opinion on that? I might have one at the end.
Well, I was while my expertise is sort of organic chemistry or environmental chemistry, I sat on the Life Sciences Accreditation Advisory Committee for a number of years, and we had Rob Golak from AMCOSH that was particularly looking after asbestos. And when we went through the agenda, he always talked about asbestos and saying, we need a better method than AS4964. And so there was always a point to push on, getting better methods out there. And I think that there was a bit of work on re-establishing that method to be more modern, to look at different techniques like maybe SEM or TEM and so forth, rather than the standard optical microscopy techniques. But I think NATA, it's been well positioned. NATA's spent a lot of time on asbestos, but it's a hard one to move.
So more generally, my answer to that question is just going to be yes. And yes, because if you look at, I don't want to go into depth into how standards are written or adopted, but if you look at the standards committees within Standards Australia and you look at the individuals on those committees, you will find a proliferation of NATA Technical Assessors and NATA staff, NATA AAC members. So certainly there is the potential for issues identified as part of the assessment process that do relate to the standards that are being applied, particularly as a methodology in accredited facilities, for that to loop back to the relevant standards committee and for that to inform the review or adoption of standards in that field. So that's a really good question, and that's a long yes. One of the other things I wanted to sort of touch on is everyone, not everyone, the vast majority of technical assessors also have a paid role of some sort, either in a testing facility or in another capacity. And I'm interested to explore what, if any, benefits an employer of a technical assessor might see as a result of having their staff going out performing this role at NATA assessments, notwithstanding the fact that they lose that staff member for a day. I'm interested to sort of track that back to say, okay, if a Eurofins staff member, for instance, Bob, goes out and does an assessment, is there some sort of tangible benefit for Eurofins as a whole, for that individual?
Look, not tangible, no. But I think it's the non-tangible stuff that is important. Like I was saying, I keep on repeating myself, but I think you learn new things. You can bring those techniques back to your own laboratory and be better at doing the work. So I think the time out is something that needs to be considered. But nevertheless, I think the experience you get from doing those assessments is well worth it, and probably not something you'd be able to bring in your own organisation without that external visits.
Okay, I might just take another crowd question. Apologies for my reading. Are volunteers trained or assessed to ensure the technical assessors have the expertise? Is there potential for a variability in the calibre of TAs utilised by NATA and hence impacting the quality of the assessment? Would anyone like to comment on how they would view they're trained or assessed in terms of their competence and in terms of, I guess, the assessment techniques that NATA likes technical assessors to apply, I guess, in the field?
Well, I can jump in a little bit. I mean, I've been doing the asbestos for 20 plus years, and I became a technical assessor in 2013. So I started doing asbestos in 1998 or 1999. So it took a fair bit of time and nominations at the time. So you had to have 3 nominations. Assessments used to be 2 years apart, and you were nominated 3 times for 3 different technical assessors to think, yep, this person knows what they're doing. They have all the skills and elements to do the job. So that's a confidence builder in itself. And then you go on to the TADP program, and it gives you a bit more understanding. And then obviously when I started, we also got to observe an assessment as well. So you got to sit and watch how it happened, got to ask your questions to the lead assessor and the actual technical assessor. So that set me up quite well for that consistency all the way through. And as we mentioned before, the collaboration, the conversations, the constant improvement in your knowledge and technique kept you to be quite consistent all the way across the board on how you presented. So for me, that's how I felt that I did it and how it had gone along. And I've been assessed multiple times over many years, and I never had any issues with technical assessors being completely different to other ones. And it might just be in asbestos, it's quite straightforward. It's either yes or no. So I think that in itself is quite easy for that world, but in other areas it might be slightly different as the times have changed differently. I'm not sure.
Yeah, so since I've only joined probably 2.5, almost 3 years ago now, so the process is very different to what Samantha had gone through. So it was proposed by both the lead assessors and the technical assessors in order as a consensus before I get nominated as proposed TA. And then from there on, they'll go through the rigmaroles of your technical expertise and which field you lay in. Then it goes straight into a committee to actually evaluate before it gets approved. So there is a still relatively stringent technical competency that embedded into that program. And then from there, working still in the operational components of asbestos analysis, even to some degree, it still remains relevant to what the technical skills are and the most current technologies and the most current techniques that we apply and how we implement it across the industry as well to bring that standard to the upmost levels.
Yeah, and I think it's one of the important roles of the lead assessor is to get the technical assessor to keep on track, make sure that they cover everything. So I think the lead assessor role is an important one. Sometimes it's a bit like herding cats, but I think the lead assessors is a very important part of the assessment process.
Yeah, and it's reassuring to know that we don't just make it up as we go along. We are infamous for acronyms at NATA. NATA is an acronym, but TADP is our Technical Assessor Development Program, so there is a formal process that we apply to new technical assessors to ensure that they understand the process and the approach that NATA is implementing at that point in time. So we might just do a couple that talk up the benefits of being a technical assessor. Have any of you been able to travel as part of your work as a technical assessor? And is that something, and if so, is that something you've enjoyed?
I definitely enjoyed it. I've had encountered technical assessors who have been able to travel abroad internationally as well. NATA's accreditation doesn't just stand within Australia, as we've all worked out over this conference and beyond that there is international travel that some of them would actually encounter, and that's probably one of the breath of fresh air when you stare at 4 walls every day. It's definitely a good one.
Yeah, one of the best labs I ever went to was in Taiwan through a NATA assessment, so won't tell you too much about that, but it was very, very good.
Okay, so that was better than that abattoir we went to in Outback, New South Wales. That's good to know. I think we're getting close to needing to wind this up now in terms of time. Just an interesting, final question, quick perspective on this is, what do you keep in mind as a technical assessor when you walk through that front door of what is effectively someone else's testing facility?
Okay, I'll jump in. I think as soon as I walk in the door, I remember this is not my lab. This is their lab. I have to look at their processes, what they do, look at the compliance, see how they do it. I think that's the most important thing, is you look at them independently, impartially, to see how they conduct, how they go about things, how they do their training. So I think that's key. Just don't, it's not my lab, it's not my rules. So I need to look at and value what they do.
It's how they organically flow in the assessment as well. So it's Samantha said, it's not your procedures, it's not your techniques, your compliance to the standard that you adhere to, and that's as far as it goes.
And to be fair.
That's it.
Fair enough. But no, that's good. Thanks, guys. And look, I think we'll bring it to an end on that note. Thanks, Paul, Sam and Bob, for your time and your insights and perspectives today. Thank you to those members of the audience who took the time to send some questions through on the app. That appreciate the opportunity to interact with you on that front, and I will hand back to Steve. But thank you, everyone.